Welcome to another episode of Two Who's Review. I'm Alex,
I'm Fitz.
and today we're checking out Boomtown, the third last episode of the Ninth Doctor era, and uh, Jesus Christ, this episode.
It's an episode.
Is it?
It's
Does it have to be?
we okay. Here's the thing, Cuff. It's really funny, but I was expecting this episode to be like horrific because I know we've kind of had discussions about this before, and I've seen the episode, albeit quite a long time ago, but before this podcast. So I kind of remembered some of it. I remembered, the Doctor and Margaret's date. I remembered, like, there was something about Mickey and Rose, although I
Yeah.
think I got most of the impressions of that based on your description of it, and I don't doubt we are definitely going to get into that.
Oh,
But,
yes, we are.
but, here's the thing. It didn't frustrate or bother me nearly as much as I thought it would. I really actually don't think it was that bad. Don't get me wrong, it's not a great episode. In fact, it's not a particularly good episode for a number of reasons,
Yep.
which we'll definitely get into regarding plot, regarding characterization, regarding certain characters whose presence in the plot I'm not sure about, and also really weird kind of confused tone. I mean, I know I said early on when we were doing this early on in this first season, it looked like it was a show trying to find its feet. It
Yep.
wasn't quite sure what the target audience was, what the tone was. Well, unfortunately, they still have these problems even in this episode. It's very, very bizarre watching
Yeah.
them move from these very, mid-2000s British TV tropes to, oh, let's have a really serious discussion about mass murder,
Mhm.
I guess.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you said that. As of right now, as we're speaking, the current lowest rated episode from both of us has been Legend of the Sea Devils, I think. I don't think we've rated anything lower than that.
Oh, no, Attack of the Cybermen.
Did I get that low?
Yeah, you gave it a 2, I gave it a... I think you gave it a 2, I think I
is that
gave it
right?
a 3.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, either way, this episode for me might sink to those depths.
Wow.
I despise this episode. I hate it so much.
Brutal.
And I think I'm curious to see if I can sway you over the course of this hour.
I'll be really curious to see how it works out, because I know the way we've done this, you've been able to point out different flaws that I didn't notice, and I sort of hope I've been able to do the same for you too.
You have a couple times, and that's honestly, it's one of the sadder parts of media discussion. It's far easier to convince someone that something is bad than it is for you to convince someone that it's good if that person already thinks it's bad.
Yeah,
and I don't know what that says about media analysis, but so be it. And I think that, well, so for me, this is my least favorite episode of this season of Series 1 of the Revived Era. Boomtown is my least favorite episode, and it comes in a really unfortunate time for it, because since Father's Day we've had very, very good episodes. And after this, the 2-part finale is also very, very good. So in this back half of the season, these last 6 episodes of the season, this is the single episode which doesn't reach the heights that Doctor Who can reach. And it sticks out like a sore thumb. There might be a reason for that, actually, but I'll get to that after we do the timescales rankings.
Sure.
So out of 225 votes, this story has a 6.9 average rating. No.
I mean, I know we don't do things by points or halves, but yeah, like, that's basically a 7.
It's not a 7.
This is not a 7. No. I'll wait to, give my final thoughts on what score when we get to the scoring, but yeah, it's certainly not a 7.
Yeah, it has a plot rating of 6.7. Again, no. This is a mess of a plot.
Yeah, I mean, it is a little bit all over the place. There are bits that I actually quite enjoy, but that's mainly because of the Doctor and Margaret and their sort of backing and forthing.
Yeah, there are isolated...
The rest of it's a little bit...
There are isolated moments that are very good, my thing is that if you consider any of those moments without, if you consider any of those moments outside of the isolated scene, pretty much all of them kind of fall apart. But we'll get there. I know
Yeah.
that's a bold claim that I've made, and I can tell you don't agree with that already. But
I don't disagree with it, but I don't fully agree with it. I can kind of see what you mean and certainly for me, the small isolated moments, they were the highlights of the episode.
mhm.
But when you put it all together, as you say, how well's it really gluing together, and not terribly, I suspect.
It has an 8.1
Mm.
for acting. This one I do agree with.
Yeah, it's fine. There are lots of great, fun little character interactions, and the scene with Mickey, that was actually just purely in terms of performances from the characters was quite good.
Yeah,
Although
Mickey.
that's also due to the writing, because you really get the empathy for Mickey's
Oh
character
yeah,
at that point.
yeah. Noel Clarke is great in
So
this. Annette Bedland is
mm,
great in this as well. There's a reason
yeah,
they brought her
yeah,
back. Uh, the other characters, they act, but they're not given as much to do, so it's not really as.
yeah. But there's nothing that really
No, there's nothing bad in this.
sticks out.
No.
Even with the campy tone, and incidentally, I'll just bring this up now, but I think in the RTD era, I think there was a clear attempt to make the show tonally sort of campy, and it's one of the reasons why I say the show's still trying to find its feet, because it's clear what it's trying to do, but it's not quite getting there. And it certainly is nowhere near as refined as it would be in later RTD series. I mean, I just thought when watching this episode a second time, I thought the tone is nowhere near as executed as well and as refined as in something like Partners in Crime, for example,
Hmm.
which is a bit over the top, but it works within the context of what they're doing here. It's just a little bit all over the place.
Yeah, well,
Anyway,
it's interesting that
um,
we've drawn attention to the time war arc in this season and how strong it
mm,
is. Um,
mm,
and I think that the finale as well is exceptionally written by RTD. I don't think I've
mm,
been in love with any of his scripts up to this point so far.
mhm, mhm.
Like he
Yeah, yeah.
knows what he wants the show to be, but he's still kind
Mm.
of struggling to find the balance between what the show was and what the show
And
is.
what it is, yeah, sure.
And I think that other writers have stepped in and done a significantly better job finding that balance.
Yeah. And
Um,
I because it's interesting, but like I think I may have said even early on, maybe even in the introduction episode of this podcast, that it the reboot, the RTD era of the reboot is it is kind of trying to mesh the old over the top style of classic Who, but with a modern aesthetic, a more cinematic style,
yeah,
more mid 2000s semi cinematic TV sort of a thing. But I think you're right in saying that the show, certainly the episodes that RTD has written, but even the show overall at this point, it's still trying to find its feet. It's not quite sure what it wants to do. I wonder if you could even make the argument that some of the biggest risks, and certainly some of the most successful risks, have been taken in episodes that RTD didn't write, because you got Dalek Father's Day and um, Empty Trial Doctor Dances, which are taking pretty big risks, but RTD didn't write them. And I wonder if it's a thing where RTD felt, well, I'm the showrunner, I need to rein myself in a little bit, and I need to, make sure that this thing is as good as it can be. But because those episodes were written for other writers, by other writers, excuse me, I wonder if those writers said, okay, well, I'm just the writer, so I can do something a little bit nuts, and as long as RTD is fine with it, then whatever.
maybe it might also be that a
Mm,
lot of the scripts that RTD has been writing are pretty central to the overall series arc. This episode is a direct sequel to two different stories, uh, being Unquiet Dead and Aliens in London. Uh, so maybe that's why
mm,
maybe it's very possible he conceived the full series arc and the finale first, and then started building
mm.
backwards. So then I have to make some
Yep,
concessions with his stories in order to get the pieces to
yep,
land exactly where they need to. We'll see an example of this in the climax of this story, definitely.
mm.
And it's possible. It's interesting because I think we're going to find out that pretty much every episode in this season has its place. Everything sets up something that becomes important later
Yeah, yeah.
on. So it's unfair to say that that's the only reason for that, because certainly
Mm.
in the episodes we've discussed that are, superior to this, Dalek obviously has a big job. It reintroduces the Daleks and sets them up for the finale. Father's Day is less pivotal, but it does come up in the finale in an important way. And then
Mm.
obviously, Empty Child Doctor Dances has to introduce Jack. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I mean, I would be so curious to learn more about what happened behind the scenes of the making of this
Mm.
season, if not just because there had to have been a significant amount of pressure on this creative team bringing back such a beloved
Oh
show.
yeah.
Any
Yeah.
misstep and it's doomed a second, and
Yeah.
you have to say probably a last time.
Yeah. And I think it is easy, I think, for us to look at these episodes in hindsight and say, well, here's obviously a couple of missteps they were taking, and yeah, there were a couple of duds here and there. But and it's true, like with all um, you know, art, I guess. It kind of goes back to that thing you say about media criticism, is that um I don't know, I feel like, well, we definitely need to be honest and say, yeah, there are definitely episodes that are better than others for whatever reason. But at the same time, I think it's also useful just to remember, think what it would have been like to write the show at this
Yeah,
period of time. That would have been, my God, the fact that RTD had the gall to to do that, uh, the guts to actually take that on.
mm.
That's really impressive. I think it's worth bearing in mind. Having said that, as you say, a bad episode's a bad episode, and we need to be honest about that too.
Back to the timescales, we've got a 7 for effects. Eh, I mean, nothing's terrible. I would also say like the Slovene animations are significantly fewer in this, and they obviously stand out a bit. But I think they're better here than they were.
Well, here's the thing: the animations themselves, the CGI, I think it's basically just as good slash bad as they were previously. But the practical effects, the actual like Margaret Slitheen costume, I actually think is pretty good and is better than
Yeah,
it was
I agree.
in the last one. I'm not sure what that's about, whether they just had more of a budget to focus on this one costume, but it looks more kind of icky and tactile and real and slimy and all that. So it's um there's a real physical presence to that costume, and they use it pretty well. Even when Margaret, she's talking to the journalist, and she just puts her head on the door of the stall, and their eyes are blinking. That's actually pretty impressive.
Yeah, I agree.
Um, they kept it to a minimum for I think pretty obvious budgetary reasons, but um, it still works pretty well. So yeah,
Yeah,
and even with the CGI effects, again, apart from the CGI Slovene transformations, there's nothing in it that I think is terribly offensive
I agree.
in terms of yeah.
It has a 7 for replay value. That is objectively false. It's an episode that gets worse on the second watch.
Yeah, it did. Again, it highlighted. I liked the like the bits that I liked the first time. I liked them more the second time watching it, but that's mainly because it was in contrast to the rest of the plot, which, as you say, not great. So yeah, I don't know if I'd go quite that high in terms of replay value. So
It's the fourth lowest rated Ninth Doctor story. I think it should be the lowest rated. I dislike this more than I dislike Aliens in London, World War Three, and The Long Game.
ouch. That is I think, and again, we'll obviously get into this. I think I can kind of see where you're coming from, but yeah, so just what are the bottom four? So it's this one, and what are the
So
others below it?
the four lowest are from fourth lowest to lowest. It goes
Yeah,
Boomtown, Aliens in London, World War Three, Long Game.
yeah. Um, no,
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, and especially, I mean, before we watched Long Game, I might have said, yeah, maybe that's the lowest, but like, I mean, don't get me wrong, there were flaws in that episode, definitely,
Oh
but
yeah.
like, there was some really fun stuff and some pretty ambitious, again, social commentary.
Mm.
Same thing with Aliens One London World War Three, flawed, absolutely, but ambition, executing that ambition for the most part pretty well. Decent plot, pretty tense. Even if there's a definite lull in the middle of sort of both stories. Um, this, on the other hand, it's like, again, there's some bits that I really do like about it, but then the rest of it's just kind of there. And I don't doubt, again, that you're going to point out some other issues that
Yep.
probably really sort of drive you up the wall. So we'll see how that all goes, I guess.
And last, very simply, 101 out of 113 people say you have to have seen a previous story to watch this one. I don't know what the other 12 were thinking. You obviously need to have seen
Yeah.
Aliens in London in World War III before
Yeah,
jumping into this.
like, because they dive right into the action, and they're very, even when they start formulating the plan, all the different areas of the building they're going to run to, they do it really quickly.
Mm.
So you get the impression that, oh, this is like a team that's worked before on a mission like this, I guess. So that alone, like the characters and the character dynamics alone, you need another episode to really see this.
Yeah, definitely.
Even with the bits that I really like about it, which again are mainly the conversations between Margaret and the Doctor, you need a background to really feel the full weight of that.
Absolutely,
So, yeah, you definitely need a previous episode.
All right, launching in, I'm going to give you a bit of behind the scenes trivia regarding this episode.
Sure.
So, this episode wasn't meant to happen. As opposed to Russell T Davies writing this, he had offered it to scriptwriter Paul Abbott, who had his own concept for this episode in the series. It was originally going to be called The Void, and it would have revealed that Rose had been bred by the Doctor as an experiment to create the perfect companion. I agree. That silence is the only logical reaction to hearing that news. Unless you've gone off mic, have you? Are you still there?
Nope, I'm still here.
Okay, great, yeah. It was a stunned silence that went for so long, I genuinely thought there were technical difficulties.
That stunned silence is very reassuring.
Yep. Looking aside the fact that the Doctor was going to be involved in human experimentation, after the run of episodes, calling Rose the perfect companion is laughable.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Yep.
I'm sitting here currently, and I maybe the audience can hear it. I don't know, but I have this really broad, nervous grin on my face because I'm just. I feel like I've just been clubbed over the head.
Yeah.
And I'm just reeling from the shock that was an idea.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what?
Well, also, curiously, the only reason that he abandoned the project, Paul Abbott, was for other work commitments. This episode wasn't shot down by Russell T Davies. It was gonna happen. And it would have been worse than this episode that we ended up getting. Purely for the implications on the show and the Doctor as a character, it would have been bad. So maybe the slapdash nature of this script kind of makes a bit of sense now.
It does, and I'm gonna say this right now. As you've said, this is not a great episode, and by the end of this podcast, I might be willing to say it's a really, really, really bad episode, but I am so thankful. I will always be thankful that this episode exists.
Yep.
Purely because of what the alternative was going to be. I cannot imagine what the show would have been if it would have been anything.
Yep.
If they went with that narrative turn. The implications of what that would have said about the Doctor, about the show, about the Doctor's relationship to their companions.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot. Even now, I'm finding it difficult to process. I have no idea what fans would have done if they did that. I'm very convinced that it would have just gotten cancelled after that.
Yeah.
Like, there's no... What the hell?
I mean, look, devil's advocate, we never saw the script. Maybe it would have been amazing. We can't say for sure.
That's true, but
we can guess. We can have a really educated guess based on what we know about the show and what the dynamics between these characters are meant to be. We can make a very educated guess and say no, it would not have been good. But we technically can't say for sure.
That's true, but I just I
But
cannot.
we can though. We can though.
Oh yeah, because it's a terrible idea. Yeah, just that. That is absolutely astonishing. That is like it's like taking the edgiest Moffat twist and the most pointless Chibnall twist and meshing them together into this horrifying, mutated cesspool of horror. I cannot. And again, as you said, maybe we're wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe that script would have worked. I've got no idea. But like, man, you got to be wondering what these people were thinking to even greenlight that. That idea just on principle makes me so uncomfortable. I can't even tell you. That's insane.
Well, I
Anyway,
I bring this up now to sort of soften the palate a bit for Boomtown, because again, like I dislike this episode to an insane degree, but thank God it exists.
I'll never stop being thankful that this exists. This is the this is one of the from the sounds of it one of the greatest behind the scenes disaster train dodges I honestly think I've heard of in either TV or even cinema.
I don't think that the expression
Can
"lesser of two evils" has ever been more appropriate. We do need to move on from talking about the void, otherwise we will be here all day.
we will be here all day. That
So I think we
anyway.
should discuss the episode that we got rather than the one that we didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Novel
Oh,
concept,
by the
I
way,
know, but
did the timescales? Did we look at the characters? What?
yeah. Or there is nothing for character on the timescales. It's plot, acting, effects, and replay.
I thought they did characters. Anyway, that's fine.
Yeah, all good. Yeah. So in this episode, we see the return of Margaret Blaine. She has concocted a plan. She teleported out of the Downing Street explosion. Couldn't take her family with her, but she's now stranded in Cardiff. So she has worked her way somehow to being mayor of Cardiff City. I think is what they said she was. And she has somehow weaseled her way into green-lighting plans to build a nuclear reactor right in the middle of Cardiff City in order for it to melt down so she can escape by riding an extrapolator like a surfboard. Okay, problem number one. There is no way that project ever gets greenlit.
What, putting a nuclear plant in Cardiff?
In the center of the city. Absolutely not. No council in their right mind would greenlight that. Nuclear power plants famously built away from populated areas.
Well, yeah.
So right there, suspension of disbelief gone. Immediately, this episode has to win me back because it makes an obscenely ridiculous move in suggesting this project has already gotten to the early construction phase, which is where they're at. Turns out the nuclear reactor not a pivotal part of the plot. We don't see it getting built, thank God. The Doctor and crew arrive in time to stop that plan. And the bulk of the episode isn't even about that. It's about it's a moral dilemma episode, which is I don't think we've had one to this extent yet in the show, at least in the revival. It's about whether or not the TARDIS crew have the right to send Margaret Blaine back to Raxacorica Falapatorius, where she will surely be executed. And it's also raising the question of whether or not a villain of the Doctor has the capacity for change.
Yeah. They definitely did explore this with Genesis of the Daleks. It was one
absolutely.
of the big moments of the classic series. I have to say it is intriguing and I think helpful that they explore it here. And that's, for me, that's when the episode is at its best. When it's getting actually really serious, these great sort of moral conundrums, and I actually really like the dialogue between the Doctor and Margaret when they're on their date thing. It's kind of those sorts of moral conundrums and exploring them in that kind of pointed way is kind of what Doctor Who does best. It's just, I mean,
No.
I'm sure you'd say, to put it mildly, it's just a shame that that's the best you can say about this episode, because there's none of that intriguing qualities throughout the rest of it.
Well, no, I agree.
Um,
Like that
yeah,
one conversation with the Doctor and Margaret, specifically the one where she calls him out on being a killer and his
yeah,
lifestyle.
only a killer
Yeah,
would say
exactly.
that. Yeah,
That
that's great.
that isolated conversation is the best thing about the episode.
Yeah,
The Doctor rightly pointing out that just because you let one person go, it doesn't absolve you of many, many
yeah,
crimes in the past. And then Margaret pointing
yeah,
out, oh well, there's only one way you could know that. Your
yeah,
life, the way you live your life, you know, you see destruction. You sometimes cause it, and then off you go. No consequences for you.
yeah.
Now face the consequences. It's something that will get brought up in Bad Wolf as well, and I think it's done a lot better there. But that dinner conversation is largely very, very good. But
Yeah. Mm.
here's my main problem with the episode. It fails on both counts of what it was trying to
Mm.
accomplish.
Mm.
First I'll do the second one first. It's the question of whether or
Sure.
not a villain of the Doctor can change.
Yeah.
A long time in the second act and into the third act as well is spent on this, largely with that dinner conversation with Margaret and the Doctor.
Mm-hmm.
They bring up a bunch of stuff. There's a lot of back and forth, and there is like a genuine question as to whether or not she can change. And it seems like she is. Like, it seems like she's genuinely, like, she's pleading for her life. She's like, I can be better. Let me be better.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rift opens, and we find out that this was Plan B, and Margaret didn't mean a goddamn word of it. She was stalling, waiting for the extrapolator to use the TARDIS's power to open up the rift so she can escape. She explicitly says this was all part of the plan. So we're not exploring whether or not a Doctor Who villain can change. We are, in fact, watching a person lie about their motivations in what should be an emotive scene, but when you watch it back, you go, well, no, she doesn't mean any of this. She's just biding her time.
So is this kind of like a a prelude to The Witch's Familiar?
Yeah,
With
yeah, it's the exact same premise of that. The Doctor and
yeah.
Davros, in Which Is Familiar, have a have a long conversation where they find some middle ground, and it seems like that they've if not buried the hatchet, they've at least seen eye to eye for the first time, and then they were both playing each other the whole time, so that conversation is meaningless. Unfortunately, the
It's
same thing
pointless,
happens with the restaurant scene. You cannot believe Margaret the second time watching it. You know she's lying. You know she's still being a villain. You know she has no capacity for growth. So what's the point? The episode fails on that count.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then there's the other point the episode's trying to accomplish,
Mm-hmm.
which is the moral question of whether or not the Doctor and the TARDIS crew have the right to send Margaret to her death.
Mm-hmm.
This is a big focus, even before the can a villain be redeemed one.
Yeah.
This is the moral question that gets brought up first.
Mm-hmm.
And no one can really answer it. Like, they're all saying you deserve it, but when it comes down to it, they can't look her in the eye, which is another nice moment.
Yeah.
This shows that, they're all talk, but they're genuinely unsure what they should do.
Yeah.
And then they get robbed of that decision they've got to make as well, as the plot is resolved by a literal Deus Ex Machina, a gift from the machine. The TARDIS opens itself up. Margaret looks into the telepathic circuits and regresses into an egg. The decision is taken directly out of the Doctor and crew's hands. They don't have to make a decision about this moral dilemma. They don't have to wrestle with the consequences of their actions. They don't even have to think about it anymore. The TARDIS has gifted them an out. So both of the moral dilemmas and moral questions that are brought up in this episode, both of them get dodged. Both of them the episode refuses to answer. And both of them, it seems like, aren't even the way the episode tosses both questions aside, it's almost like, well, this wasn't even worth thinking about. So what was the point of the episode then?
Yeah, that she gets pangled in the end.
Yeah, she gets the pangle treatment.
Isn't it weird? Like, I know this sounds like a joke, but it's genuinely the case that we can now say, oh, if we had a nickel for every time a Doctor Who villain got regressed back into their infancy at the end of an episode,
2 nickels.
Yeah. That is so weird.
Hopefully you can see where I'm coming from, right? Like,
yeah,
both of the mission statements of the episode abandoned. It's almost like if, and and it's not the same thing. But you mentioned Aliens in London World War Three, how it brings up these
Mm.
political
Mm.
parallels and the social
Yeah.
commentary. The equivalent to this would be if at the end of that story, before disappearing in the TARDIS, the Doctor looks at camera and goes, "And just remember, guys, I'm saying this without a hint of irony. All of the political and social questions we brought up throughout this episode, completely unrelated to regular life." And I'm not saying this ironically. I 100% believe that. Okay, see you next week, guys.
Right. Um. Yeah, I do kind of see where you're coming from there. I'm trying to just sort of rally some of the thoughts that I've had watching this story,
Yeah.
because there was a period, certainly before this point, where I would have said, yeah, the whole Pangle treatment, oh, I guess they're doing it better than in the Leisure Hive, because, like, there's kind of a moral conundrum happening here, but now that you've pointed that out, I now think, yeah, there's a bit of a cowardice, I guess you would say, on the writer's part, that they're not
Yeah.
really willing to you know, pick a side on what could be a very thematically rich episode,
Yeah, I mean,
because at least
we're robbed of
mm,
opportunities for the TARDIS crew to debate amongst themselves what the right thing to do is, which is the what would have been
yeah,
interesting to watch. Instead, the
yeah,
TARDIS gives them an out, and then we don't have to think about it anymore.
yeah. Um, and it's, yeah, like, because if you take it back to, for example, Genesis of the Daleks, the Doctor actually does make a choice there,
Yeah,
and he actually says the reason why he did it. The episode concludes with the Doctor saying, yeah, I know I chose to spare the Daleks, but I know, I think he says something to the effect of, like, I think, some greater good may come out of it, and I don't want to, commit, genocide and things like that. So it's clear that Doctor Who can wrestle with these themes
hmm,
and can do it at the very least in a decisive way. You may not even, always agree with the side that it lands on, or
yeah,
the Doctor lands on, but, it can do something with them. And does what, well, really all great sci-fi and to an extent great fiction does, which is by, looking at these really serious themes and not being wishy-washy on them. So I think you're right to point out that the emotional value, the catharsis that it's promising, which is innately linked to its thematic expression, they're just not really fulfilling that promise.
yeah. I
They're
mean,
just kind of saying, serious thing, serious thing. Oh, but don't worry, guys, because it didn't matter anyway.
like imagine if at the end of Genesis of the Daleks, instead of the Doctor having to make this, uh, big decision about what he's going to do, what side does he stand on, what can he square with his morality. Imagine if instead that Time Lord from the beginning of the story comes in and makes the decision for him and takes and wipes out the Daleks and says, "Okay, Doctor, off you go."
Yeah.
Like, imagine how robbed you'd feel if that was
Which
the
they
case.
theoretically even could have done because they're Time Lords, but no, they sent the Doctor,
Well, it's part of their. It's
because they're
part of their.
cowards. And
Yeah, it's part of their. They've got an image to preserve.
yeah, exactly. Getting the rogue to do their dirty work.
Yeah, exactly.
But
They can
yes,
always.
it would have been, yeah, probably, yeah, like really frustrating if the guy just comes in and just says, "Yep, I'm snapping my fingers, making that decision for you." Um, so yeah, I can understand what you mean. Excuse me, there, and there's not even, again, like those conversations, as I've said, certainly for me were the best part, but there's enough beyond that. There's not much else here, and given they're not even doing that, excuse me, as effectively as they could be, you wonder, yeah, why did this episode kind of exist at all?
Hmm.
Well, we know
Well,
why it existed, but like,
it's so that the other one didn't happen. That's
yeah, but
why.
like, surely you want more of a justification than it existing simply to avoid disaster.
Yeah, exactly. That's such a great Broomtown. It exists to avoid disaster. Yeah, so like it's pointless to talk more about the moral questions this episode raises, because the episode itself doesn't want to talk about them. At which point, we're left with just having to discuss what happens in the episode itself. We'll have to discuss the sci-fi romp that this episode has now been distilled down into. And like I said, I've already mentioned the complete lunacy that is the Blythe Druke project being pushed as far as it did. Again, no way that ever happens. But then there's also a bunch of little stuff throughout the entire episode that is just very, like, it's stuff that, well, one of the better comedic scenes in the episode is when Margaret's trying to kill the Doctor at the restaurant, right? Like,
yeah.
Like she's trying all these things, and the Doctor sees through him every time and is able to, counter it and all that stuff. Which, again, is very funny until you're left to consider its context in the episode. They're at the restaurant. The Doctor would collapse. The patrons would be hysterical. There'd be people freaking out there's a dead body in the restaurant. But even then, like, she would then have to escape because she can't stick around. She's the mayor of Cardiff, and there's a dead body at her table. That would be horrible. She has to get back to the extrapolator so she can ride it out when the rift blows up, essentially. And she's wearing a handcuff that would give her a massive electric shock if she moves more than 10 feet from the Doctor. So at that point, you got to wonder, once she kills him, is her plan to drag him back to the TARDIS? That's not inconspicuous at all.
Right, yeah.
You see what I mean?
You wouldn't...
You see what I mean when I say, like, every single isolated moment of goodness in this episode completely falls apart when you consider the outer context.
Yeah, I guess I see what you mean. I mean, I don't think... I mean, I certainly didn't, notice that when I, watched the episode, but, certainly now that you've mentioned it, I think, yeah, that does make a hell of a lot of sense. The weird thing is, they introduce the little bracelets, obviously as just a way to make sure that the Doctor and Margaret stay sort of close together, but
yeah,
it never gets brought up again in the rest of the episode, and that's not... I don't know, I'm not against that, but, like, you'd think that it would have been brought up again in the episode. Like, it literally just exists to get them, I don't know, in close quarters, I guess?
It's something that they threw in so they can justify letting Margaret out for a bit, you know? Like, if there wasn't that extra security measure, you'd be well within your rights to go, wait a minute, this is extremely risky, Doctor. What are you doing? She's already captive. She's obviously going to try and escape. Don't do this. They put the bracelets on so the audience knows, okay, there's no way out. They're just going to have a dinner so we can discuss the moral questions that aren't going to get answered.
Yeah, it's Boomtown.
It's Boomtown, yeah.
I want to... Sorry, if you got something else.
I was just sighing, because there's still so much more I want to discuss, but it's not related to this aspect of the episode. I don't want to get to the Rose stuff right now because it's more to say
later
about this.
On, yeah.
But you go ahead.
Yeah, I do want to bring up one thing. Jack. I'm just gonna put this out there. You can disagree if you want.
It's not a good Jack episode.
He does nothing.
Yeah.
He doesn't do anything, and when I say that, like, he does do stuff.
Yeah.
But the stuff he's doing is neither unique to Jack terribly, apart from a couple of, quippy little one-liners, and it's nothing that can't be taken care of by another character, in particular the Doctor. And we know this because when he's formulating the plan of what they're going to do, the Doctor says, do you mind, like, who's in charge here? And I get that that's meant to be, like, a comedic moment, but, like, it just kind of highlights how pointless Jack is in this episode.
Yeah, definitely.
And the weirdest thing is, I get that he has to come back, like, he's got to be there for the finale, but if that's the case, why is he here for this episode specifically? I mean, maybe you can answer that better than I, just because you've seen these episodes more than I have.
Yeah, look, my only guess is they didn't want to have two-part episodes back to back, so they had to throw in an episode in the middle, and not having Jack in it after the way the previous episode ended would have been weird. Like, there are things you could have said to establish why he wasn't there, but I think because he was such a good character in the previous episodes, you would have felt his absence.
Yeah,
I will say, like,
I guess.
I do agree that it's not a particularly good Jack episode. There's nothing much for him to do, but I will say there is a small moment that
Mm-hmm.
helps when once we get to the finale to show his growth throughout the
Mm-hmm.
season. And it's when Margaret has Rose again captured. It happens again. I forget what count we're at. I'll figure it out and give you the proper number in a bit. But Rose,
I think we're at
Margaret,
7 or 8, maybe.
it's either
But
7
anyway.
or 8. Margaret has Rose captive and says, "Give me the extrapolator or Rose dies." And Jack immediately looks at the doctor for what to do. Like he's he's letting go of that that ego and that competitive nature they had in the previous episode, and he's recognizing the chain of command almost.
Yeah.
And it's a nice moment because in the finale he will take a lot of cues from the doctor and he will be very trusting of him. And it's just, and this is a small moment to be like, okay, the trust is building, the trust is coming, and especially after early in the episode when he starts calling the shots. When he's laying out the plan, he forgets that the doctor's in charge. To then in this moment have the Jack immediately recognize it is a nice moment of growth that helps out when we get to the next episode.
Fair.
I'm not sure if without this it would have been unbelievable that he would have had that growth or not, because we've already been through Empty Child and Dr. Dances where he's been thoroughly humiliated by the Doctor. But it is a nice moment. It's the best thing that Jack does in the episode at the very least.
Sure. No, that makes sense. But yeah, I feel like that argument sort of shows that he does like have something to do, but overall he feels just kind of there.
Oh no, he's still just
there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's certainly nowhere near as much of an interesting presence as he is in Empty Child and Doctor Dances.
Oh, in any other Doctor Who episode that he's in.
Yeah.
This is his weakest appearance, I think.
Yeah.
I guess, is there anything left to discuss beyond the Rose and Mickey subplot?
I do like, again, just the pure emotions behind the conversation between Margaret and the journalist.
Yeah.
I mean I like it again, purely just on a gut feelings level. Like, it feels like a nice conversation. But again, as you say, it would have been really interesting. It would have been great to see that character growth.
Yeah.
But they don't do anything with it.
Yeah, I guess it would have been lovely if that moment wasn't just the only moment of humanity she shows. Because as we later learn, as she's confessing to the Doctor, she's lying the whole time. So as it stands, it's not a nice moment of character growth. It's a moment of character that isn't the one that we end up getting by the end.
And the weird thing is, because it's so wishy-washy with what it's trying to say, you actually could have done something interesting, and it might have even been more interesting than a redemption arc where maybe the Doctor realizes, some leopards don't change their spots, you know what I mean? Like, he realizes, I'm not sure how they would have pulled this off. I don't know if it could have been that the Doctor realizes, just some people are irredeemable, but that would have still been an interesting moral conundrum if they kind of did that and stuck with it.
Maybe.
And said, Margaret's never going to change. What are you going to do about it, Doctor?
Yeah.
Are you a no second chances guy? Are you a mercy guy? What are we doing here? But they don't really do that.
Another really, really simple fix to the episode. Like, if you still want your big high energy finale where the Earth's going to get ripped apart, you can do it. All you have to do is have Margaret be genuinely reformed and genuinely apologetic, but just forget that she set the extrapolator for Plan B. That's all you got to do. Then you can still have the rift explode. You can go, oh no, what have I done? This was a mistake. I forgot to deactivate the extrapolator. They run back to the TARDIS. She helps them, sort out the problem. The TARDIS crew can still have a little debate. Is she lying? She's clearly lying. This was her plan. Now she's trying to save face. No, I think she's really changed. And then you can have the Doctor open up the heart of the TARDIS for her, as opposed to it just doing it on its own. You solve all of my problems right there and then. You've explored redeeming a Doctor Who villain, and you've had the TARDIS crew properly deal with the moral questions the episode raises. But the fact that they had it be all part of this grand plan the whole time, that is the one element that ruins everything about the episode. except for the Mickey
Um,
Rose subplot, which was already sufficiently ruined by the
yeah.
previous 10 episodes of the
I,
season.
I'm gonna just throw something out here for a sec,
Yeah.
and this could just be me misinterpreting the episode, so you correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
The idea of, oh, this was my plan all along, Doctor. I could be misinterpreting this. Like, was that what it was saying about Margaret's character, or was it
100%.
more just a kind of, oh no, I'm just gonna change my mind here and just save myself as a last
No,
ditch effort?
no. She actively says the words "just as I planned," and then goes on to describe how
Okay.
if she was to ever get captured, it would have to be someone with a lot of technology. So she set the extrapolator to feed off
Okay.
that
Yep.
power. Like
Yep.
the episode takes a long time explaining the fact that this is all 100% part of Margaret's machinations.
But it's definitely all part of the master plan. Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough.
I mean, I went into this like thinking maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was just something that she decided in the spur of the moment. Like the Doctor hasn't made up his mind. This is a lot easier for me. This is guaranteed out. But no, the episode is very clear about the fact that this was the plan all along.
Which even then, I mean, the episode may not have been great, but even then, if it was just a split-second decision, that kind of would have made sense. And you could have even theoretically, you could have even theoretically had even then kind of a moral question, because if it's a split-second decision where, Margaret literally has Rose by the throat, you could have had an interesting, back and forth with the Doctor, where the Doctor's like, you don't want to do this, and maybe Margaret can be like, I have to do this, and the Doctor could have had, a Dark Knight, you're the one with the gun, Harvey, sort of moment.
Yeah.
So the fact that they didn't even do that is kind of it's quite disappointing. But I think even your idea that you just said of Margaret having that change of heart, however quickly that would have been, and thinking, oh no, I want to save the planet, that would have been really, really interesting, and would have given the Doctor at least more incentive to forgive her.
Yeah, definitely.
You wouldn't have even. I wonder if even at that point you would have had to have the heart of the TARDIS open up. That the Doctor could have just forgiven her. Maybe
could
not.
Have.
But,
you do.
But still better than what we got.
Yeah. Well, you need to have the heart of the TARDIS open because that becomes crucial to the finale.
Yeah,
that's what gives Rose the idea to.
That's very true.
Open it up so she can get back to the future.
Yeah.
That's the only purpose the Deus Ex Machina of this episode serves. Is to properly establish what the TARDIS can do, so that it can be the savior in the end of the season. Yeah. But we're done talking about that, I think, or at least we'll talk about that in the future. I think it's time.
Here it is, our segment of the week.
First of all, number 8. I did the counting. It's number 8. Rose gets captured or trapped. Number 8.
Captured or trapped.
Yeah. Rose also has very little involvement in the main plot of the story, but she doesn't have to because she's got her B plot. She's called Mickey to Cardiff under the false pretense that she needs her passport. And when she was explaining that to the Doctor, she was so smug about it, I wanted to slap her because it's like, she's like, what if we get stuck in South America? I might need my passport. And the entire time I'm just screaming at the screen, the psychic paper!
I forgot about that.
Yep. And then she has the gall to be like, you see, I'm prepared for anything. No, you're not. The Doctor's psychic paper would have worked. And also, you had when the Doctor dropped you back off in England, in episode 4 and 5, you properly packed, and you didn't bring the passport. You're not prepared. You're an idiot. But anyway, it turns out that the passport was it was a false pretense for getting Mickey there because she wanted to spend time with him. They go out. They plan to have a big night out in Cardiff. The whole time of which, by the way, she's gushing about the Doctor and the adventures that she's been on with him. Which, if she would have looked at Mickey even once, she would see, no, he doesn't. He clearly doesn't want to hear me talking about this. But that's fine. It's when people go traveling, they sometimes do that. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Mickey then brings up the fact that he's been seeing someone else while Rose has been away. Trish, someone, I think. I forget her surname. And I'd like to remind you all what my main problem with Rose's character has been for this entire block of episodes that we've been discussing. Fitz, would you like to do the honors? What has been my main problem with Rose?
That she engages in blatant infidelity and is a terrible moral lesson for the millions of impressionable children who could be watching the show at any moment.
Yep. Any good-looking male character that she's had any small amount of contact with, she is immediately fawning over and flirting with. And now she has the gall to get outwardly and visibly jealous when Mickey brings up another woman. She has the nerve to act like the victim here. Again, she knows what she's done. It gets described to her in the previous episode, and again, she doesn't say that's not the true or that's not the case. She doesn't acknowledge it, but she doesn't deny it, which is an acknowledgement as far as I'm concerned. And now Mickey brings up that he's been seeing someone else purely because he knows where she is.
Yeah.
And he describes what it was like for Rose to leave him behind, and he gets visibly emotional about it.
Mm-hmm.
And like we've said, it's a really good performance. It's a really good piece of writing about what the reality of this relationship is.
Yeah.
It's cruel. It's one-sided, and Mickey calls it out. She can barely look at him in the eye. She kind of mumbles that she's sorry, but it's clear that she doesn't mean it. Because again, she's visibly jealous. She calls him out over it. Again, in the back of her mind, she must be thinking, well, this is the same shit I've been doing, so why am I getting so jealous about it? Like, for the love of God, this is how the episode, or the series even, decides to handle these issues? It has someone else bring them up and highlight them as bad?
We know what the weird thing is, and it kind of goes back to the broader issues that you raised of this episode not really being decisive in the moral questions it's raising, because this is a smaller thing, you could argue, but it's still a moral question.
Yep.
If they made it so that, it was only Mickey bringing this up, and he's got that, that great scene where he's crying, explaining how terrible it is, what he's been going through, which, fair enough, he's been through a lot, and, his girlfriend's running off in time and space doing God knows what, and as he says, you know that you can call me because I will, pick up the phone and come running. That's fine, but if you're gonna do that, you need to follow through with it, and Rose kind of needs to really feel the weight of her actions, but they don't really do that, at all. In fact, after a certain point, I don't think this issue gets raised again at all.
Absolutely not. This was going to be my main point as well. The way the story wraps up this subplot in this episode. First of all, the rift starts opening up. Rose immediately runs off. Doesn't tell Mickey to follow her. Doesn't look back and see how Mickey's handling the crisis. She just runs off and abandons him again, and Mickey rightly calls her out about it. But then once the crisis is resolved, she goes back to find him. He's sort of in the shadows. He's watching on. We can see that he's made the decision, I'm done. And he sort of walks away, and Rose says he deserves better than this. And then they remark about Margaret getting a second chance, and Rose goes, yeah, that would be nice. So you get the impression that she's sort of realized how badly she's been treating Mickey, and, that she wishes she could do it over again. Literally, the next time we see these two interact, she is just as awful to him. She is just as neglectful towards him, and he is still being really rather nice to her.
What was the next episode?
It's going to be Parting of the Ways, the finale, which was written before Boomtown. Because remember,
really?
Well, Russell D. Davies had to step in and write this when the other writer fell through, yeah. And he only wrote this as a concept because of her performance because of Annette Badland's performance in Aliens of London World War III. So 100% this episode was written in the middle of production of the full season, and the finale would have to have been written by that point.
Yeah, right.
And in that episode, Rose is trying to get back to the future to help the Doctor.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, because she's stuck on Earth.
She's stuck on Earth, and Mickey's there, and he's trying to help her out. And then I'm going to quote the exact conversation that they have, and the tones in which they say the lines. And when you watch the episode, you will know that I am not hyperbolizing this. This is a conversation they have. Mickey says, Rose, if you go back there, you could die. And then Rose says, that's a risk I'm going to take, because there's nothing left for me here. Mickey says, nothing, clearly referring to them, and Rose says, no. So where was that second chance, Rose? You said you want that second chance. You got it right there. You had that opportunity to not treat Mickey so badly. You continue to do it to his face. So you've learned nothing. The one episode of this season where Rose shows any kind of change or growth, and it's abandoned. Fuck this character.
I apologize, Cuff, for laughing. And I know I have had a history, even on this podcast, putting in my rants every now and then. I hope they're good fun for the audience. So I'm certainly not blameless. I'm just kind of absorbing the blow, I suppose, that you've just dealt this character. But I'm looking for reasons to contradict you here, and I've got to be honest, I'm not really finding any.
Thank God.
And I think it just kind of goes back to what I've always said about this topic. For one reason or another, I don't have the same visceral gut reaction that you do to the way this topic is handled and the way this character is handled. I don't know what that's about, but I do understand why it frustrates you as much as it does. And certainly, I mean, unless there's some kind of interpretation I'm missing, or I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe my feelings will change once we watch more of the revival. But yeah, I can't think of any counter arguments, or any terribly effective ones at least, to bulk against what you've just said. Certainly not with this episode. So
I'm honestly like, again, I don't know why this character became so beloved. I'm hoping that you're seeing something that I didn't. I've been hoping this entire time for you to find the one aspect of this character that makes all of this stuff more palatable and more okay, or at the very least, like I said, this is done with Amy in series 5, where she tries to seduce the Doctor. And the episode immediately calls it out. So okay, this is bad behavior. Amy will learn from this. And she does. And she becomes a significantly better character once Rory's around more. But there's nothing like that with Rose. She shows zero growth throughout her 4 seasons that she's there for. She remains the exact same character, regardless of whether Mickey's there or not, regardless of who the Doctor is, regardless of the stories that she's in. She is always the exact same cow that I hate.
I mean, that's a bit brutal.
Am I wrong?
But
what are her redeeming qualities?
She has a spirit of adventure, a bit.
What companion doesn't?
I'm sure that there are some if we were to go back in time and find them. But yes, no, I see what you mean. She cares about the Doctor.
To a degree that I'm uncomfortable with.
Yeah.
And again, you'd be hard pressed to find a companion that, at the very least,
yeah.
Adam is the only that doesn't. Adam is the only long-term companion that doesn't care about the Doctor. Let's put that out there.
She has moments of compassion here and there, but again, as you say, what character doesn't, unless that's a deliberate
all
feature.
Of this you're describing right now is the bare minimum. There needs to be more than that. And I don't think any of these things, she shows compassion here and there. That doesn't make her a compassionate person.
Well, like the Doctor says, just because one little person happens to smile the right way and you decide to be compassionate,
Exactly. I'm going to give a pep talk to Nancy about how, the future isn't bleak and how there's hope for the future, and how it's okay. It's bad now, but I promise it'll get better. I'm gonna be compassionate to her, so that I can continue to be an asshole to Mickey. That's how I'm gonna square that with my conscience.
I mean, infidelity and mass murder, obviously, massive differences. But yes, you could argue there's disturbing parallels there, especially given, as you say, this is this is our main character. This is our fish out of water character. This is who, this is the Earthling, the one we're meant to really be identifying with, and um, you know, we're meant to think, oh well, what would we do in her place? Um, so yeah, and I don't doubt that because you said before that she would get worse in the next season, but in a different way. I think you said she would replace infidelity with codependency, which is
Yes.
just as bad, but in
Hmm.
a different way.
Yeah, I agree.
Um,
Well, that's what I said.
so
Yeah,
we'll,
she essentially
yeah,
replaces. Well, it's hard for her to continue to be this of much of a bad person to Mickey when Mickey's not there anymore.
yeah,
So instead, what they do is that they have her attach herself to the Doctor to a disgustingly, uh, to a level of which I'm not comfortable with, especially when
hmm
we consider, we've already discussed 19-year-old girl, 900-year-old Time Lord.
hmm
Don't do it.
yeah, yeah,
And she'll become so reliant on the Doctor that can't make any decisions herself.
hmm
She will stick by his side to
hmm
a degree that I find toxic. Like
hmm
she'll be confronted with the question of, literally in her last episode, she'll be confronted with the question of, you can go with your family who you've known your entire life and spend the rest of your life with them in safety, or you can risk your life with the Doctor. And she's not going to even think about it for a second. She's not going to look back at her family. She's not going to say goodbye to them. She's going to go to the Doctor immediately. And I don't like that.
Because even someone like Donna, for example,
Yeah,
who I mean, we've discussed is a great companion, at the very least, a way better companion than Rose is. Um, Even then, and maybe this even did happen. You'll have to remind me. But if she was faced with that decision, like she probably would choose her family because her family are actually really good and
yeah.
lovely, and she's a
Well,
a
Wilfred
kind
is.
person who really cares about them. So anyway,
I think a better example is
um,
I think
hmm,
there's a moment in, I think it's the Lazarus experiment, where the Doctor's
hmm
running off to confront Professor Lazarus, who's become
yeah,
the abomination. And Martha has a moment where she says goodbye to her family. She says, get them to safety, and then she runs after her. Like, she
hmm,
at the very least considers her family before going to help the Doctor.
yeah,
And
yeah,
also, in the finale of that series, she will take some time out of the episode, and she will actively dismiss the Doctor, a man that she is in love with at this point,
hmm,
and she will take some time out to check on her family and make sure they're safe.
hmm,
These are values
yeah.
which Rose does not hold by the time we get to the finale. Her family is a consolation prize to her.
Mm. Or or in as it's kind of proved in Parting of the Ways, or just a tool to help her get to the Doctor.
Yep.
Um, when she
Every
gets them to help open the heart of the TARDIS. So
the people who are closest to Rose only serve to her as vessels to get her what she wants. And that may sound harsh, and you may be saying, well, clearly not, because that's, she's a human being. She loves her
hmm,
family. And then I will say, check the tapes. Watch these episodes back. Tell me that I'm lying. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm being too harsh. Point out the one moment in any of these shows, any of the episodes that Rose is in, where she will actively choose to be with her family and take care of them, or even just like, to any moment that she puts anything before the Doctor.
mm,
Find me that moment, and I will say, okay, now I don't think this is a disturbingly toxic dynamic.
hmm um,
And you will be unable to do so.
yeah. I mean, I'm not. I don't think I'm really able to do so now. And I'll say this because you've said at the very least you don't understand why this character is as popular as she is. I mean, I get that that's not the core of why you have a problem with her,
No.
but that's one of them. And I do have to say, I certainly agree with that part of the assessment now more than I did when we started this thing, because, I think we looked up, like, there are lists saying, oh yeah, no, she's like, the second best companion. I think I even read another list. I don't know what it was from, but yeah, it listed her as like the second best. This certainly the second best revival companion, and I'm
Yeah.
like, um, no,
No, absolutely not.
um, no, like.
I think it also, like, a huge part of.
Certainly in RTD's era, Martha and Donna are just better companions.
Oh,
Like, let's just get that out of the
oh,
way.
yeah. a huge part of the reason why I think that Rose is significantly overrated is because I think Martha is significantly underrated. Martha gets no love, and that is absurd because she's infinitely better than Rose.
She's pretty good. Again, we'll discuss this more obviously when we get to our episodes, but yeah, even from memory, like she's way more interesting and inquisitive and funny and compassionate even. She really cares, and she's doing the work, so to speak. That a good character should do.
I think it's interesting to sort of bookend this episode. It's interesting I've been able to talk you down about Rose. Like when we said this at the top of this, it is way easier to get someone to dislike something than it is to get them to like something.
Than it is to get them to like something, yeah.
Is there anything more you want to say about Boomtown? I know I've a lot of this Rose stuff has been unrelated to Boomtown. I've been talking about season 2 a bit. Bit of a slide. I apologize for that, but
that's all right. I've done it before. I did it with my 20-minute Moffat rant.
Well, yeah, and I called you out for it. And now for me to do it is hypocritical, and I apologize.
That's all right.
Is there anything more you want to say about Boomtown? I don't think there is. It's a very
one actually. No, maybe two little things.
Okay.
Just to sort of while we're on the Rose subject, there was one moment which even when I watched it, it did make me sort of raise my eyebrows a little bit, and I'm sure it was a moment that would have frustrated you right at the beginning. And it's a small thing, and maybe I'm mammalizing it a bit too much, but there's a small moment at the beginning where after they've made all their funny jokes about the TARDIS and they're walking off, there's a bit where Rose gets really excited and just cuddles up to the Doctor, and I'm like, Mickey's right there.
Yep.
That doesn't seem to be a great thing to be doing.
Nope.
Given that he clearly misses you and you haven't seen him for God knows how long.
And especially with the whole reason you invited him here was so you could see him. And now that he's here and you're ignoring him even more.
It's like, because as you said, like, her talking about how exciting her adventures have been, fair enough. Like, if you go traveling, whatever. But, like, putting it all together, you think, what's really happening here?
Mm-hmm.
So there was just one small moment that just sort of stuck out to me that I was sure would have frustrated you.
It did.
The other moment that did really annoy me was when they see the bad wolf thing.
Yes,
and the doctor, and the Doctor's like, bad wolf. We've been seeing that everywhere, and then we get the really dramatic music, and then they just completely ruin the dramatic tension. They cut through it with a knife with this really dumb joke. It's like, nope, there's no pattern here. It's like when you hear a word on the radio and then you hear it all day. Like, apart from the fact that even without the finale, we know you can clearly tell this is trying to set up something.
Yeah.
But especially in the context with the finale. Like, I know why they're doing it, but, like, that's such a poor and lazy and really ineffective way to sort of wrong-foot the audience. Like, what's the joke there? I don't even think as a teenager I would have been fooled by that.
Here's the thing. I think that I know why that was thrown in. I think it must have been to seed the fact that it's not just an Easter egg. Like Bad Wolf has obviously been reoccurring throughout the season, but I don't know if you would have really noticed it unless you knew what the finale was going to be. Because, I mean, think about it, like, we're looking at these episodes now with the hindsight that Bad Wolf becomes incredibly important.
Yeah.
But if you're watching these episodes week to week, it's possible you would just forget that Bad Wolf was coming up. Because there's significantly more important things happening throughout each episode beyond just the words Bad Wolf flashing up on screen now and then. Especially in the last story, the 2-part episode, Anti-Child Doctor Dances, Bad Wolf is written in German on the bomb that Jack sends away. You're going to easily miss that. So that's 3 episodes, or 2 episodes in a row, rather, with not a lot of Bad Wolf. I don't think there was a Bad Wolf in Father's Day either. So by that point, you might have forgotten about it. So having them pointed out here, and also like have them in universe acknowledge that it's been happening, it makes you go, oh yeah, what is happening? So that when the finale the next episode happens, and they shine a bigger light on it, you're not like, oh, where's this coming from?
Yeah.
It's just this one extra little stepping stone to get you where you need to be for next episode.
To get you to that point. yeah, fair enough. I think, as you point out, it's very easy to say this with hindsight because we know like what Bad Wolf is,
Yeah,
and they drop hints at to what it could be in I think pretty subtle ways throughout the other
yeah,
episodes. I think it was just for me the execution. I think, and again, I find it impossible to remove it from that context of knowing what Bad Wolf is, but like even on its own, like the execution just seems so sloppy to me,
it
and
is.
the tone of it just seemed really kind of confusing and frustrating. It's like what are we doing? We've gone from like tense to funny to tense to kind of funny, but like not in a good, considered way.
Well,
Things
it's
just are kind of happening, and this is just not helping with that.
yeah, I agree. I think that's part of why I think this episode is also kind of sloppy in
Hmm.
general. The pacing is
Hmm.
very,
Hmm.
very sporadic. Like
Hmm.
it's a thing where, you know, after they chase Margaret down and they do the funny little
Hmm.
teleport thing, and you know, the doctor teleports her back, and she's still running. But
Hmm.
why is she still running? She's been teleported. Why would she still be running on the
Yeah.
other side of the teleport? She would have stopped running because she's away from danger.
Hmm.
Never mind. That's an incredibly minor thing. Um,
Yeah.
After that, there is no action until the rift opens up, and that is like 3 to 4, 5 minutes to the end of the episode. So it is a very
Yeah.
slow paced episode, which isn't a
Hmm.
problem, but it goes from very very slow paced to instantly very very high energy and high pace, and the
Hmm.
world's gonna end.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I'm comfortable with them experimenting with pacing
Yeah,
and things like that. But apart from the fact that on principle it needs to be considered and it needs to feel considered, because as you've said, there's no real emotional payoff to the end of the episode. The higgledy-piggledy pacing just kind of seems. It just looks slapdash. It
yeah,
just looks sloppy. There's
and
no way you can really. There's not really any room for interpretation there. I
yeah,
think.
and you've got these
It just
weird
looks like it's been knocked together
yeah, and there's a lot of weird
kind of
tonal things
quickly.
throughout the episode, like you've pointed out,
Oh
like
yeah.
that scene where they figure out Margaret's plan. You know, it's you know
Hmm.
they're kind of joking around, they're throwing around like you know they're discussing the plan, they're sort of being jovial with each other. The Doctor notices Bad Wolf. It gets very very serious. They pass it
Hmm.
off with a joke. They're talking about how
Hmm.
excited they are to go to Rascofalaboratorius. Margaret
Hmm.
drops the bomb that she's going to get executed. The tone
Hmm.
suddenly mellows out considerably,
Hmm. Hmm.
and that's kind of present throughout the entire episode now that I think about it.
Yeah.
Like when the reporter is discussing all the deaths that have happened
Hmm.
while the Blythe Druid project has been underway,
Hmm.
you know, slipped on an icy patch. It was decapitated. It was a very icy
Hmm.
patch. That's weird on its own, but also the one before that,
Hmm.
it's like, what about this person? And Margaret goes, well, it was dark. I didn't see him in my car. Like, Jesus Christ, this
Hmm.
is the mayor of Cardiff known to be guilty of manslaughter and she's still in office?
Well, as she said, it's just Cardiff. It's not like the people in London care. So
Well, but the people in
you know,
Cardiff care,
yeah,
surely.
yeah, 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 yeah. But even what is that other thing she said? It's like, oh yeah, they spoke French. It's not my fault if the signs were only written in English and Welsh. It's like, yeah. And again,
Yeah,
like you
all that
can
leads into
kind of
like,
see what they were doing, but like
yeah, they're trying to
if you're
be
going to go with the dark comedy, like you need to be more careful when you're doing it.
well, yeah, they're trying to be funny about it, but also in
Hmm.
universe, this is a person who's been responsible for, at the very least, like you know, not directly responsible, but at the very least indirectly responsible. The world believes anyway for these
Hmm.
deaths. They're clearly just the
Hmm.
Slovene attacks, you know.
Yeah,
But also, like,
yeah, yeah,
she's
yeah.
trying to build a nuclear power station in the middle of a populated area. She's indirectly responsible
Hmm.
for people dying as a result of the project. How is
Hmm.
it still going ahead? How is she still,
Hmm.
you know, how has she gained funding for
Hmm.
this? How are people so
Hmm.
enthused about the project? The
Hmm.
more you talk about and examine the episode, the more it falls apart. It's the
Yeah,
worst episode this
yeah.
season.
I yeah. There's one other tiny little detail I want to mention.
Go
It
ahead.
does link back to the tone here.
Yeah.
The ridiculous sound effects of her teleporting. Like, man, what were they thinking? Like, it honestly is almost as jarring as the farting moments in Aliens of London World War
I
Three.
think
Like
the
they're using
go on, sorry.
cliched. They're stock
The
sounds, yeah. They're the
bling.
stuff you, yeah. It's like bling, 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 bling. Like it's the stuff you would expect on a Saturday morning
Yeah.
cartoon. And it just shows it shows its age. It shows that this is such a show from the mid 2000s. It's almost not funny. Like, I can't. Again, this is a sorry I've got no head joke. This is a thing I would expect from even How Clean Is Your House or something like that. Like, I don't understand what the producers or the editors or whoever was responsible for this was thinking. Like, how are we meant to take this seriously? Because here's the thing, even in Classic Who, as wacky as the sound effects were in that show, and by God, there is some insane stuff. As crazy as the incidental music is, as wacky as the synth stings are, at least it's original, yeah?
Yeah.
At least at least it's unique, it's got its own flavor, and once you get used to, again, the rhythms of Classic Who, you think, oh, actually, this is really interesting, and again, unique and cool, and I can vibe with this. But here, they're using a stock sound effect that must have been used in God knows how many, kids' TV shows of the mid 2000s. So I can't even pretend to take it seriously.
I mean, I was
And I don't know. Maybe we would be different for a modern audience who maybe didn't grow up in that era and didn't know what these sound effects were. But I cannot separate them. It's so stupid.
I didn't even notice the sound effects because I was more interested in the backing track to that scene. Like it was meant to be like they were playing this kind of like bouncy and jovial tune. It sounded more sadistic to me. It sounded like a piece of music that was meant to put you in the mindset of Margaret during this scene, where you're trying to run away from someone, but they keep bringing you closer. Like, it's got to be scary, and the music kind of amplified that for me. Maybe that's just me. And I was like, but like that music seemed more like horror based than comedy based at that point. I don't know if that was the intention or not, but that was just weird.
Well, that just goes to what we've said. The tone is so confused. We've got, spooky music, but wacky sound effects that I can't even pretend to take seriously. So, this episode, it's a bit of a mess. To put it one way.
It's going to be interesting scoring it. What are you going to say?
Look, I don't want to say I've been swayed too much by your criticisms of this, but I kind of have. You've made some really, really good points, honestly. And stuff that I hadn't thought about, or if I did think about it, I hadn't thought about it nearly as thoroughly as you did. Again, with the Rose stuff, it doesn't, again, on a visceral level, bother me as much as it does you, but I can understand it. But your points, especially about how unsatisfying and uncathartic this episode is, because they're not even really attempting to deal with the moral questions that they're posing. Because of that, I'm going to go ahead. This might surprise you. I'm going to give it a 3. Simply because it's bad, but it's not so horrific that it makes me want to rip my own eyes out. Let's put it that way.
Cool. I think I'm going to be far harsher than you here.
Sure.
There is no scene in this episode that works for the like collective storytelling they're trying to accomplish. Even the good scenes in isolation are ruined by where they stand in the full narrative and the fact that they build towards nothing. Therefore, it's a waste of time. The stuff that does build up to stuff doesn't go anywhere, in both this episode and the future of the season. I'm giving it a 1. I hate this episode with every fiber of my being. It gets that point because we didn't get the void as a result.
That's true.
The fact that we were spared a 0 makes this a 1 by default. Like we said, the episode that we would have gone was going to be worse. Therefore, I cannot possibly give this a 0. Because we know that there's worse stuff that could have happened. No,
absolutely.
Therefore, it's a 1 for me. It's my least favorite thing I've watched for this podcast so far. Even Attack of the Cybermen, when that was bad, it was way more interestingly bad.
I can see what you mean. Fair enough. But I'm going to stick with a 3. Okay, fair
I think
enough.
the Legend of the Sea Devils and Attack of the Cybermen, both episodes, I think you were more generous on than I was anyway. So
definitely.
It's more It's more like we've been consistent with that ourselves.
I think I've been pretty consistent. And the weird thing is, I found I got way more frustrated with certainly Attack of the Cybermen and Legend of the Sea Devils for whatever reason, like, those episodes made me angrier, but this is one of those episodes where, for me, the more I think about it, the more flawed I realize it is. So that's why, again, I'm going to give it a
Mm-hmm.
3. So,
We don't often do this, but revisiting the timescales real quickly, you've given it a 3, I've given it a 1. A reminder that 225 people gave this an average rating of 6.9.
yeah, that's not correct.
And looking at this, 4 people gave it a 10. What do they see in this? Even if you don't think it's as bad as we do, it's not a 10.
No, God no. It's Boomtown. What else can you say?
Forget it. It's Boomtown. Yeah, we're about done with this. I don't even know what to say. Like even Legend of the Sea Devils, we had good things to say about some aspects of it.
Well, that's the weird thing, though, right? Because I said that I got angrier when I was watching Legend of the Sea Devils, but like the bad parts of Legend of the Sea Devils, I enjoyed discussing them more than the bad parts in this episode, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, at least in that sense, we were kind of having more fun. Here, it's just kind of... It's an episode. It exists. Things happen in it. And that's it.
I think a lot of that is down to the pacing. Like Legend of the Sea Devils just does not stop.
Yeah, that's true.
This one is much more of a drag.
Yeah, that's very true.
Anyway, let's. I don't want to keep the audiences lethargic as we're becoming. Next time we're going to be discussing the second Doctor episode, the Crotons.
That should be neat.
Yeah. As of right now, I don't know what I think about that episode yet. So this will be an interesting discussion to have. Until then, I've been Alex.
I've been Fitz.
And I mean, at least this wasn't an episode that didn't happen.
Great.
I still can't believe that was going to be an episode.